Hi, Gordon out in the shop again with another edition of the Unscripted Series. And this week I'm going to talk about clamps and clamping pressure. As you've seen, we use a wide variety of clamps here in the shop. And yet, you want about the same clamping pressure on each one. Each time, each different operation, there's a right amount of clamping pressure. I mean, too little and you don't get squeeze out and the glue is not going to infuse in the wood properly. But too much is just as much of a problem. You can starve the joint of glue by squeezing it all out, by putting on too much clamping pressure. And the reason the clamps put on different pressure is that they have different handles, so you get different hand torque on them. You got to be careful with that. Or the structural rigidity of the clamp is different. So you want to try to aim for the same amount of clamping pressure no matter which kind of clamp you're using. And you need to understand how much pressure it's putting on them. The best example I can give you right now are our bridge clamps. We used to use these, and the bridge clamp, you know, when we clamp it on, I'm going to put on my caul. This one's already clamped on, but I've got to reach way in with that clamp, and so it's got to have a long throat, but it's got to be, I've got to be able to fit 3 or 4 of them in that sound hole of a soprano, so it can't be a huge clamp. So this one was really great when we found it. It's used for violin, and it goes through the F hole in a violin to do bracing, internal bracing. So it's good, but it's not very rigid here. It worked fine, but the interesting thing is, I'm going to use my finger as an example. I could clamp down on it, and you could see that might hurt, but I can clamp and clamp and clamp, and I'm not screaming yet, because what's happening is this is deflecting. And so the cool thing about that clamp is that you could just clamp and clamp. Now, and it wouldn't, you could not really, with this one, you cannot fail by over clamping because of the lack of rigidity there. But it took a long time to do it, and while you're doing that clamping, the bridge is kind of moving around because that ice skate thing I tell you about with glue. So I got these new clamps, which are much more rigid. I haven't tried this yet. I did that little demo before I ran the tape on this, just to see. This is going to hurt very quickly. Now it's in there, and like a quarter turn, and that's all I can take in that. So there's so little deflection here, and you just want to be really careful if you're using this type of clamp. There's other clamps that have kind of an offset handle that can give you even more torque. Be really careful about those. There's furniture clamps that, I mean, they're great clamps. The offset handle is wonderful for really torquing down. It's great if you're doing a mortise and tenon joint when you're building a shaker style, you know, table, piece of furniture. But when you're working on a delicate instrument and you've got these little parts, doesn't take much to over clamp. So know what clamp you're using and be careful using it. I'll see you next week.